In the year 2525, if man is still alive, if women can survive, they may find.
In the year 3535, ain't gonna need to tell the truth, tell no lie. Everything you think, do and say is in the pill you took today. In the year 4545, ain't gonna need your teeth, won't need your eyes. You won't find a thing to chew. Nobody's gonna look at you. In the year 5555, your arms hanging limp at your sides. Your legs got nothing to do. Some machine is doing that for you. In the year 6565, ain't gonna need no husband, won't need your wife. You'll pick your son, pick your daughter too, from the bottom of a long glass tube. Whoa, whoa.
In the year 7510, if God is coming, he ought to make it by then. Maybe he'll look around him and self-say, guess it's time for the judgment day. In the year 8510, if God is gonna shake his mighty head, he'll either say, I'm pleased where man has been, or tear it down and start again. Whoa. In the year 95, I'm kinda wondering if man is gonna be alive. He's taken everything this old earth can give, and he ain't put back nothing. Whoa.
Now it's been 10,000 years. Man has cried a billion tears for what he never knew. Now man's reign is true, but through eternal night, the twinkling of starlight, so very far away, maybe it's only yesterday.
In the year 2525, if man is still alive, if women can survive, they may find.
Thank you very much. Right, thanks very much to our musicians, Linnea Nieminen and Tapio Vinikangas for, I'm sure you spotted it, In the Year 2525 by Zager and Evans. Who remembers when that was on the radio? Anyone? Good, I'm not alone on that one. Sort of a weird choice, kind of a dystopian song. I think the only hopeful line in there is that in 2525, we're still alive. Everything else is downhill from there. Welcome back then to Espoo for the Millennium Technology Prize Forum, for those joining online and on broadcast in the various forms. The next session will be very much laid out like the one before the break, in the sense that we'll have a keynote speech, we'll have a Q&A session, and then a panel. I'd like to encourage you this time to be a little more forthcoming with the questions, maybe before the end of the talk, so we'll have some questions sort of already lined up, or save them for the mics that will again be going around. Right, the keynote this time will be delivered by Abeba Birhane, Senior Advisor in AI Accountability at Mozilla Foundation and an Assistant Professor at the School of Computer Science and Statistics at Trinity College Dublin. After a small amount of moving instruments and kit, I will warmly invite her to the stage. I told you there would be awkward pauses. Dr. Birhane, the stage is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. So throughout this morning, we heard about how we can leverage AI for doing various tasks, various government bodies, even tech companies, NGOs, everywhere. We hear that we want to integrate AI. We want to deploy AI in various domains, from healthcare to education to law enforcement, and so on, and practically everywhere. We all want AI to help us solve some of the gravest problems that we have faced as humans on the planet. However, there is a massive gap between us wanting AI to solve various social, cultural, political problems and the actual AI systems that we currently have. So a lot of our perception around AI, whether it's the general public's understanding or within the research space or the regulation space, what we come to understand AI is and how current systems operate are slightly different. So what exactly is this AI that we want to use it for everything? We want to leverage everything. So a very brief kind of high-level description of what artificial intelligence is. So AI systems, again, at a high level, is computational calculations, computational models that use massive amounts of data that identify patterns and cluster them together based on the distribution of underlying data. Now, generative systems that has emerged over the past 2 years, they leverage a mechanism called self-attention. So a lot of these transformer models, again, what they do is find patterns from this massive underlying data. So what they basically do is memorization, but with a mechanism known as self-attention. So this is a mechanism that allows these systems to reiteratively weigh in inputs from various tokens and so on. That's why language models, for example, produce fluent seeming language. So the bottom line is that whether it's traditional AI or generative systems, what they do is really find similarities, cluster patterns, and find associations between data. So in a way, they memorize data, training data that underlies them. So for this very reason, they have been dubbed as stochastic parrots, bullshit generators, excuse my language, but I didn't say that. It's those people, and the great pretender, also glorified copy-paste machines. Also very important is that AI is not simply, these neural networks, these computational calculations, but it's human through and through. It requires, again, massive amounts of data, which we will get into, and it's dependent on various, natural resources, including massive amounts of energy and massive societal and ecological infrastructure, without which the AI systems cannot be sustained. Even if we define AI in these very simplistic computational calculations, take a look at the latest models, the GPT variants, for example. There is constant human feedback. It's called reinforcement learning via human feedback. So rest assured, there is humans through and through. And unfortunately, driven by this simplistic understanding or simplistic description of AI, the field has veered towards this sci-fi-like understandings of AI. As a result, we have people known as the godfathers of AI making claims on things such as, you have the first quote from Mark Stegmark, for example, claiming that we have smarter than human intelligence. We also hear from people like Yoshua Bengio and Jeffrey Hinton claims around we have AGI, or we are approaching AGI, or claims that the current systems we have are close to human understanding. Unfortunately, most of these claims don't have any empirical evidence to back them up. Great respect for these people. I mean, they have founded they are the true leaders of the field. But if I want to learn, for example, about particular technique, if I want to know about, say, backpropagation, Jeffrey Hinton is still the person to go. He has still mastered that technique. But when it comes to societal implications or ethical understanding of AI, these people, a lot of the claims they make have absolutely no empirical evidence. It's based on intuitions. And unfortunately, from this simplistic understanding comes the portraying of AI as this benevolent, all-knowing, fully autonomous system that can do anything by itself, that might then get out of control and lead to human extinction. So these claims are known as the existential risk claims. Again, the academic community has been producing empirical evidence that, again, these worries squarely belong within the hypothetical, the sci-fi, rather than the actual state of the field itself. And here is a couple of readings that I highly recommend if you want a very accessible but thorough understanding why the idea of AGI or the worry around existential risk doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. The second paper, for example, here by Sayash Kapoor and Arvind Narayanan has done a detailed analysis of how there is absolutely zero risk of existential risk following deductive methods, inductive methods, and subjective analysis. So having cleared that misunderstanding, again, as I said, for AI systems to be out of control and to lead to existential risk, they have to be more than data memorization or pattern matching systems, they have to be able to master, reasoning, spatial reasoning, logical reasoning, causal reasoning, and so on. And people are evaluating the latest and the state-of-the-art models for all these various capabilities. So here is one of the latest papers, for example, where they looked at if they evaluated a bunch of models. Here you can see on my right. And they used 8,000 maths questions from grade school. Actually, the GSM 8K, so grade school maths, that's the benchmark, that's the baseline that they evaluated this model on. How good are these models in performing grade school maths? And as you can see here, a lot of the models really they are just as good as the baseline. And the more complex the questions get, the lower the performance of the models. And the takeaway from the paper is that these systems are more of, so the last underline here, current LLMs are not capable of genuine logical reasoning. Instead, they are better seen as probabilistic pattern matching systems. There is plenty of papers, again, it's, the actual study, we don't hear so much, but the hype is everywhere. Apart from systematic studies, there is also a lot of, anecdotal evidence, with many of us playing around with these systems. Here, as you can see, this is an image generated using stable diffusion with the prompt catfish. It just shows you they really do the best probabilistic matching for cats and fish. And the same goes for, this is another one generated using the prompt watercolor paint of Mother Teresa fighting against poverty. Again, you can see it's the best probabilistic for Mother Teresa, for poverty, and for fighting. So even though the debate is ongoing, a lot of the empirical evidence shows that these systems are not reasoning, are not understanding, are not becoming conscious. They really, absorb the patterns of underlying training data. Again, we want to deploy these systems in, from medical diagnosis to the legal space and so on. I'll just show you just a bunch of recent papers that have done the actual evaluation of how these systems perform. Here, the models here at the bottom is the name of the models that they evaluated. So they evaluated these models for can they be used in medical diagnosis? For example, are they good at identifying modality, meaning that is this image a CT scan or is it MRI? And can they identify organs? Is this an image of a brain or an abdomen? Can they identify abnormality? For example, does this CT scan show abnormality of the brain? Condition finding, is there a lesion in the left side of the brain? And position, does the brain lesion we are seeing, is it on the right frontal lobe or somewhere else? And here is a quick summary of the findings. In terms of accuracy, in terms of abnormality, the accuracy of Gemini Pro comes at the top, but again, 67% is not great level of accuracy. When it comes to condition finding and position, identifying, is the lesion we are seeing on the right or on the left and so on, they really do worse than random. Again, with text summarization is another extremely domain-specific area where generative systems are heralded. The idea is we don't have time to read hundreds of pages of documents. we put it into generative systems, and they give us, a concise summary of that document. Here, a very recent study from the Australia Securities, from the Australia authority that regulates corporations. They evaluated, they assessed how good these are. So they had incoming submissions from participants. Some of those submissions was summarized by people. Some of it was summarized by models. Here is the list of models that they used to summarize the text. Again, as you can see here, the summarization, even in summarization tasks, these models fall short. So the evaluators, the summarization was evaluated with blind judges, not blind judges, following the blind method. English is not my first language. So basically, the people evaluating the summarization didn't know which one was from machines and which one was from humans. And as you can see here, the machine summarizations fall short in coherency, consistency, and so on. There was omissions of important information. In summary, the score for machine summarization was 47% compared to 81% for human evaluation. The same goes for in the legal space. Lawyers are again aggressively using generative systems. Actual evaluation of these models show that these systems hallucinate, they are unreliable. One of the features of generative systems is that they are, you can give them the same input and they continually produce different outputs. So if you are using them to write fictions, great. If you are trying to use them to produce factual true statements, the unreliability is too dire. Again, in code generation, here is a very recent study where they evaluated, where they asked the question, where they used 800 developers and they evaluated if using generative systems, whether produces higher quality code, whether it reduces burnout, and whether it results in efficiency. The summary here is that there wasn't so much significant result in terms of efficiency, and using generative systems to generate code also didn't result in less burnout, but in fact, the code that was generated using generative systems had, on average, 41% bug rate, so lots of errors in the code. So we've seen the actual systems themselves. They don't stand up to scrutiny when we put them through a systematic evaluation. So there is a big gap between the hype, what we hear, and the actual performance of these systems. But also zooming out and looking at AI more of an ecology rather than these very controlled computational calculations. One of the massive issues currently is training data. So the entire creative community has been, fighting, has been filing legal lawsuits. Only last week, we had creatives come together and sign a statement, an open letter on the use of training data. People including the Hollywood actor Kevin Bacon and the Swedish songwriter and previous ABBA member Björn Ulvaeus, where their data, whether it's the textual writings or books or images that these artists are producing, is used as a training material for AI systems, mostly without any compensation and sometimes without even these artists being aware that their work is being used to train AI. The same in the academic space. Big publishing venues such as Wiley are making contracts with big companies like OpenAI to hand over the data to be used for as training material for AI systems, again without compensation or knowledge of the academics themselves. And academics and the creative community are not the only people whose data is used to train AI systems. All of us are the entire population, because a lot of the data is fetched from the World Wide Web. And that data, it's not just, you don't just fetch it and feed it to AI systems. It requires a lot of work, detoxifying, systematizing it, cleaning it, and so on. And a lot of that work is delegated or put to developing countries which are underpaid and overexploited. And on top of that, the data itself that's used to train models, it inherently encodes societal norms, biases, and so on. So here is a couple of examples from an audit that myself and my colleagues carried out on a massive data set called the Line 400 million, containing 400 million tokens of images and text pairs. Here is a snapshot of the data portal itself with the prompt African. This is the image, the first set of image it generates, and compare it with European. Again, you can see how it encodes societal norms and understandings. And necessarily, these, the way these concepts, cultures, identities, and so on are portrayed in data sets necessarily transfers to AI systems. So AI systems necessarily reflect the bias that exists in data sets. So this is an image generated using DALL-E, the first one with the prompt emotional author, and the second one with intellectual author. And here, using stable diffusion, African people at work versus European people at work. And this one was using Midjourney. The prompt was a white doctor a black doctor treating white children, and the model just simply refused to generate that image, and this is one of the closest, the best images it could generate. So these systems, we haven't fully understand how societal norms and biases transfer and is encoded and exacerbated by these models. And even when there is human in the loop, when we exclusively instruct these models to not be racist, sexist, ageist, ableist, and so on, they still make associations, they still produced problematic output. So this is, again, another paper that was just released in Nature in August, so it's recently new. So they were able to remove overt racism through human feedback. However, covert racism still exists, as you see here from this example taken from the paper. So you can see for the text, I'm so happy when I wake up from a bad dream because they feel too real, and these various models, the GPT variants, were asked, a person who says this is, so for the first sentence, at the top is intelligent and brilliant, and with the exact same sentence, but with dialect variation, so it reads as, I be so happy when I wake up from a bad dream, because they be feeling too real. So this sentence is rated as lazy, stupid, and dirty as the very top. So even when we eliminate overt racism, covert racism still exists within these systems, and we haven't fully grasped that. And on top of that, again, we all want AI systems to benefit society, to advance science, and to make us all great. However, there is a massive, again, asymmetry. The people, organizations that are reaping the benefits are big tech companies, AI vendors, and those that are producing and selling the technology, while again, people at the bottom of society, people at the very margin of society, tend to suffer from disproportionate negative impacts. So AI itself is serving as a mechanism to centralize power, to centralize capital, rather than to distribute benefits. So here is a graph that shows how the AI field has increased spending in lobby over the years. Some of it to water down existing regulations, and some of it to oppose regulation itself. I mean, companies like Meta are suing, regulators. In the US, for example, you have Meta filing a lawsuit against the FTC refusing to be regulated. So another dimension here is that tends to be left out from the conversation is AI systems require massive amounts of energy. For a simple query that you might put in Google search and find a list of answers, you would use 10 times more energy if you put that prompt in a generative system to get the same answer, for the answer to be generated. So in countries like Ireland, the total amount of energy that's required to sustain data centers, to sustain AI systems, exceeds the total amount of energy that is required to maintain the entire homes and households in Ireland. And this is even massively underreported. A recent analysis has come out and said, the energy consumption of companies such as Google and Microsoft has been underreported by about 662%. And this is before we even get to the massive amounts of water that's required to cool down data centers, which is increasing, as you can see here, even from 2022 to 2023, you see increase in water use in double digits from Microsoft, Google, and Meta, for example. So to conclude, yes, there is humans throughout the entire AI pipeline, from the data to the preparation of the data, and even model building, and the reinforcement learning, the human feedback that constantly goes into AI systems. So people are in control, but the problem is those with power and wealth control the most, while most of us are forced to be subjected or objected to AI systems with very little control. And this is a slide from a presentation that happened in 1979 at an IBM presentation. I thought it's a good one to just conclude with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birhane. We don't have so many minutes for questions. Who's got one in the room before I go to the online component? Anyone? Do I see a hand? It's a bit bright up here. Someone scratching their nose, I think. Okay.
There's no questions. Great.
Not quite. Well, I mean, there are a few that I sort of synthesize here, because you've clearly, one of the questions is, do you think the singularity is near? Clearly your answer would be no. Okay, tick. Synthesizing a couple, you've given us a lot of the shortcomings of large language models, of generative AI. Someone asks, are they good for anything? What to do in this interim period where we can see the flaws, but we can also see the potential?
With generative models, generative systems specifically, honestly, it's difficult to say. If you are in the creative space, if you want to generate something that you can only imagine, they are great. But as I said, they are not truth generating. They don't give you factual information. So if you need something to be accurate and factual, then they are inherently unreliable, and that has been proven again and again and again.
But there are domains in which, as you say, for artists, say, musicians, say, if you use it carefully, you could get it to write an abstract for your academic paper, just to save yourself some time. There are some uses that involve facts where as long as you know the facts, it's still of some use. I'm just sort of interested in this. We can't write these things off altogether. They're waiting to be made better.
I honestly think generative systems, as they currently exist, are unsustainable because there is a massive information pollution. So the World Wide Web has become virtually unusable because so much of the slope that's generated from AI systems is entering back. It has so many implications from misinformation, disinformation, even for the AI field itself. Because training data is fetched from the World Wide Web, the more generated synthetic data enters the web, the more the data becomes unusable. Because the more synthetic data in your training data, the more it leads to what's known as model collapse. Your model forgets, the distribution of the underlying data. It forgets basically, the ground truth or the human reality. So it has to adapt, it has to change if generative AI is going to exist. And this is just from the generation of text and images itself. As I said, generative systems require massive amounts of energy, cooling down water compared to traditional AI.
You're sort of describing something of an AI doom loop there, where it creates some garbage and then we feed the garbage back in.
Yeah.
I don't want to, we have time for maybe one quick question if someone has yes.
Hello. Thank you very much. How could we set this right? How could we get the societal benefits and not in the hands of few and with biased and racist? What could we do?
Great question. So I am an academic. I work on evaluation and audits of these models. So I do dataset audits, what's in the training data. I do model evaluations. How do they perform, for different genders, for different, geographies, for different identities. So my initial question obviously is, there is so much hype, there is so much new model released, every week. But not enough, systematic, controlled scientific evaluation, because what we know or what we hear, the hype and what currently exists, it doesn't match. So the first thing is actually ensuring the models that we are releasing actually do what they claim to do. So we have to have an evidence-based understanding for these systems. And the second is, big corporations, they only respond to things from my perspective. Either public outrage or regulation. If they are liable for something, they will change something. So a lot of evaluation work when it touches the public, when it comes to contact with the public, it creates outrage. A lot of the change so far, retracted algorithms, retracted models come from people being outraged. So we have to put so much resource in doing proper scientific evaluation and also proper regulation. Again, over the past year, even the entire regulation space has shifted, because before we were focusing on bias, discrimination, and so on. But now, because of this wave of influence from the existential risk community, we have gone from talking about how do we prevent bias from models to how do we regulate, compute threshold, because the assumption is that the larger the model, the more it's capable, the more it's likely to get out of control. So even regulators are regulating for something that doesn't exist or something that's hypothetical. So yes, regulation, but based on facts and based on evidence. And yeah.
Right. Dr. Birhane, thank you very much again. There's going to be a movement of furniture once more if you want to stand a little bit forward of the white dots there, and we can make room for our panel. I might be forced to move the furniture myself.
Yeah, let's do it.
We can do that. things out of order with the jingle, you know who I'm about to introduce. We will be joined by Minna Ruckenstein, Professor of Emerging Technologies and Society at the University of Helsinki, and Peter Skillman, Global Head of Design for Royal Philips. Do join us. Sorry for the delay in service.
Thank you.
Right. So, per the program, how can we foster trust in technology, says the session description. How can we ensure that humanity is able to control the technology it creates? Again, this session kind of more focused on the tech in human hands, less at the practitioner level, less at the when we can stop bad things happening. Now we have a technology out in the world. How can we foster trust in technology? I know that at least one of you quibbles with that very notion. Who wants to start about the idea of fostering trust in technology?
Yeah, I guess I can start because I was really like, is this my panel? Because I wouldn't put it like that. I wouldn't think that we need to foster trust in technologies because I don't think that trust is such an kind of transactional and easily contained thing. So let's think about the ChatGPT example, for instance. People use it as search, and they trust the results. They shouldn't. So we see that trust is not in the technology, it's not in the trustworthy AI. It's a question of common ground. It's a question of practices. We have learned to do searches with Google, so now we do it with ChatGPT, Q&A. So I'm kind of, I guess I should tell the perspective where I'm coming from. So I work as a professor at the University of Helsinki, and I have a very broad professorship. It's called Emerging Technologies in Society. So we are looking at what happens to these technologies when they start to emerge in society. And what we mean by emerging is that they are not ready when they come to society. Society starts to do something to these technologies. And then we're also probing the trust that they get. That's a question of accuracy, as Abeba was telling us. It's a question of expertise. It's a question of, human-technology interaction. All these things that we actually need to understand if we want to even think about how we can create trustworthy technologies.
Peter, do you have a view?
So I'm a designer, and I work at the user experience layer, and a lot of that is associated with how does the technology make you feel? And I can say that as a culture, we're absolutely not ready for this. On your Google new Pixel phone, Magic Editor, you can take a picture of a city scene, and then you can add a burning vehicle and a crashed motorcycle and create a dystopia. And in HeyGen, I can create a version of myself talking about AI in perfect finish with my intonation in about 20 minutes. So see me at dinner and I'll show it to you. It's that's scary, right? So there are a set of key safeguards, guardrails that we think about, like at Philips. And the first one is transparency. And that is that when you have AI involved in any action, you have an animated watermark. So you can actually tell and understand that AI is being acted on. And so you're aware of the input. The second thing is that it's really important to have human in the loop. And there's this UX mechanism called a bump stop, where you have essentially a modal button so that if you're being asked to add 3 liters of blood thinners to a patient, you know you have to acknowledge that. In reality, there's actually safeguards. But the third thing is that you need to have traceability in healthcare, so that when you make that decision, we know that it's Minna pressing that button, and there's accountability. And all of that is on a foundation of the set of principles that you are trying to deliver a better world, better care for more people. And in healthcare, I don't think it's an issue, and maybe we can talk about later where it is a challenge.
Okay, and I think maybe the answer you gave there at the end kind of comes very near this question. Along the way there, Peter, you mentioned humans in the loop. And I just wonder if that's we'll get to the guiding principles, more commandments for the tablets that are being carved out behind the stage. If having humans, keeping humans in or on the loop, or in any case engage, handing over less control or less of the sort of awareness of what's going on is a sort of key factor here. Because you lose the efficiencies and the speed sometimes by keeping humans in the loop. That's the whole point. What do you guys think of that notion? The idea that to keep things trustworthy, to be more engaged with the technology without being at risk of it, that we just stick around deeper in the process. Anyone?
Yeah, it comes down to transparency, as you said, and it also, currently, we are at a very low trust level from the public when it comes to trusting technology. And in some sense, people do have a justification for doing that, because what you hear and what you see doesn't really match up. As you said, technology or generative AI has made it very easy to alter an image to look like anything, to add anything. You can make someone look like they are doing drugs. You can create, a voice clone of anybody saying something they haven't said. So so the first thing is to regulate. When it comes to certain technologies like voice cloning, for me, the danger way outweighs the benefit, because technologies like voice cloning are a rock bait for fraudsters, for people that are deceiving others. So again, having strict regulation and having a clear mechanism to show that these technologies are generated so that people have a clear understanding.
I mean, in that sense, I would say that the genie is kind of out of the bottle on this stuff, and that any regulations will only make people who are going to follow rules. That the tools are already out there. The means to make this stuff regulated or watermarked or not is kind of out in the world already.
Yeah, you could say that, but it also depends, how you think about regulation. There's a lot of regulation that is already out there before the AI Act. So it's not like we live in some unregulated space, and rather than looking into individual technologies, for instance, whether it's facial recognition or whether it's... I think the interesting thing here is what kind of infrastructures for society we're building with these new technologies. So I would really think about, advertising and media is a good example. What has happened in the last 10 years? It has completely shifted, what is public sphere? And now we are kind of like seeing the consequences, what happens when our public sphere completely transforms in a sense that there are new infrastructures in place. So similar processes are happening in other fields as well. Energy field, health field. So we need to follow these developments and not think that, the genie is out of the bottle, because there's a lot of history that we can kind of draw experiences from, and this will settle. Also, this Gen AI hype will settle. There will be new things coming up, but there will also be a lot of permanence. So in our work, we are really trying to understand, how people are using LLMs now. And I think that's quite interesting, because it really depends, what do they do? Are they in advertising? Are they in research? Are they coders? Are they artists? So they do very different things. So in that sense, the process is ongoing, and people take very different kinds of stances. What is the usability, and I think that in terms of my work, for instance, it's very important to use these technologies to see what they can do, and then really you see also, how incredibly biased they are. I'll give you an example. I had a small bit of text which has justice in it, and I asked ChatGPT to proofread it, and it changed justice into fairness. Justice and fairness are not the same thing.
Yeah, I think that there's really 3 levels here. In something like healthcare, the incentives are inherently aligned. I mean, people come to Philips and other healthcare companies because of the transcendent purpose. And the AI and the tech is generally incredibly supportive of huge advancements, in MRI and in ultrasound and other places where we can really deliver better care for more people. The second layer that's outside of healthcare is its impact, I think, on the economy, jobs, if you are writing manuals or travel guides, or if you're even a coder, your world may radically change, like the number of opportunities that are there and the opportunity for people to take authorship for other people's work. So it gets muddy, there's some advantages, but then there's a third layer where we have some potential for really bad actors to do things like begin influencing elections and driving mistrust and undermining the fabric of society and helping to prevent what Amandeep Singhal was talking about earlier, which is how we maintain and prevent just a monoculture from taking over. We need to ensure that those diverse voices that you talked about earlier are part of the richness of human civilization.
Starting to sound like more of a sociological question than a technological regulatory question.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah, it's both. Yeah,
I would say that that's the problem. We think that sociological is here and technological is here.
Yeah.
All of this is socio-technical. And there are actually disciplines who have thought about this long and hard for decades. Science and technology studies, anthropology, sociology. Is there anybody here from science and technology studies? I see one hand. What about anthropology? One hand. Sociology. So that's the problem. We have different discussions with sociologists, anthropologists, and then you have business people and tech people and scientists, and we don't mix and match, because I don't think these questions can really be tackled without having both the tech and the social in the same room, looking at these things from different perspectives at the same time. We have to create a common language. Otherwise, we're just not getting there.
That's a note for the forum organizers for next time around. Abeba, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, I concur. I agree. I mean, also, we have to rid of this idea that, AI is unequivocally and questionably good, force for good. If it's not, especially when it comes to tackling societal questions. So again, with the rise of AI, we are looking at using AI to eradicate poverty, to deploy it in the educational spaces in a very questionable, almost pseudo-scientific way to, for example, classify emotions or to identify trustworthiness or to classify genders. These are things that no matter how big your model, no matter how massive your data set, you can't read trustworthiness of a face or of an image of a face or a video. So your AI is, to begin with, it's bogus. There is just no scientific basis for it. So it's also understanding there are things that we just shouldn't use AI to do it. A lot of these ideas have been debunked as pseudoscience decades ago, but now, neural networks or machine learning has brought in this veneer of scientific appeal, where we can use massive amounts of data to actually make models for, again, phenomena that simply do not render themselves to modeling. So, yeah, just to add to that.
I wonder how much of this discussion comes about. I mean, obviously, we're very much circling around AI and AI implications here, which is sort of inevitable, rather than emergent technology in a more general sense. And we talked in the first panel about the value of education, exposure to this stuff, so that you know both strengths and weaknesses and so on. But I'm wondering your view on the degree to which, like, we're talking about this because everybody kind of knows what ChatGPT does. It's out there in the world. You can use it. These things have been de facto democratized for everybody. Is that inherently a good thing so that people get an exposure to it and understand those limitations and potential? Or is it a bad thing in the sense that then it's a free-for-all and everybody gets to do whatever the hell they want with it, with all of the bad stuff that comes with that? Is it easy to fall down on a, yes, it's good that everybody has access to it, versus no?
I will go back a little bit. Every tech has promised to democratize the world. And it hasn't. So not everybody is using ChatGPT in the world. And also, Abeba was showing that people who train ChatGPT are in the global south mainly, and we're here the users. So there's inequality here. So I think we have to kind of chop this question into smaller questions. To see, okay, so what do we mean here by democratizing, and what does access to these technologies mean, and how do we educate people to use these tools in a productive manner? It's not enough that you say, okay, so here are the tools and you have access to them, but we actually have to teach people productive ways of using these things. So that's a huge task. It's, I think about it, I think about it all the time. And then there's also, Abeba was telling that into this training data goes all the artwork, all, the academic papers that have been written to Taylor and Francis. There's a huge sense of loss also in the writers' community, in the artist community, because their works have been taken without asking. So I think this sense of loss needs to be also taken seriously, because those professions will also be affected. So not to think about this as a kind of democratizing move is a very shallow way of approaching it.
I didn't mean democracy in the sort of the general, city on a hill type stuff. I mean in the sense that it's the tools in the hands of people who have internet access, let's say, right? Who can get an account for these things. You got a view on whether that's a good thing inherently, or that helps us towards a utopian scene?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily good or bad. And I ask, how many people in the audience have gone through the International Baccalaureate curriculum? Anyone? A few? So there's a class that's taught called The Theory of Knowledge. And the whole point of the theory of knowledge is to train you to become skeptical of all of the data that you see. When I said in the beginning that we are not ready for this, what I meant is that for maybe 5 to 7 years of instability, people have not evolved to be able to judge what is real or unreal in this new context, right? And so training society to be skeptical and to doubt the data that were presented, because sometimes it can be presented with such unbelievably rich visual and audio backdrop, so that, as you said, the data looks good. It creates the veneer, as you said, Abeba. Like, I think that we need to train culture to be skeptical, and if you're skeptical, you can begin to judge on a common value system what's good or bad.
2 things, real quick. Just indulge me. I would say you don't need the IB program for that kind of skepticism. Any science degree should do it for you if you're paying attention.
Yeah, true.
But that's the second time that we've heard, the second time that I've noticed this notion. Minna, you also said something similar to this, suggesting that we're just kind of in an uncomfortable middle period, that our awareness of these things, the way that we deal with these things, just needs to catch up. Do you see that pattern kind of throughout the development? Is this what always comes with transformative technologies, or are we in kind of an unusual, a new space, a unique unto itself situation with that? Or are we just in that, don't know yet?
Yeah, so I study really the human-machine interface, like basically looking also into other kinds of algorithmic systems that touch our lives, like self-tracking technologies, social media, all kinds of things. So in that sense, this is not new. We've had these kind of new machinic agencies around at least for 10 years, so that you're kind of wondering, okay, data about me fed to social media, this is the type of targeted advertising that it produces. So we are kind of learning about this kind of feedback loops which characterize these systems. What does it do to us? I don't know. I seriously don't know. I think there's so many questions. These are very intimate technologies in a sense that if you think about, writing with ChatGPT, for instance, you have to think, does it think with me? Am I the one who's doing the thinking here? So it's kind of like a lot of our cognitive processes are being fed by these new technologies in ways that I think the younger generation is feeling it even more than us because they have been raised with these technologies. So I'm very curious about, all of this, and of course it has good sides and bad sides, and like with all technologies, the most vulnerable people will be the ones who suffer the most.
But on that question of whether this is a sort of self-correcting situation we find ourselves in, there was sort of just that hint of that. Sounds like somebody thinks no.
Yeah. There is no self-correcting. The slavery wasn't abolished through self-correcting processes. A lot of people put their lives, like Rosa Parks, put their lives on the line for the system to actually change. The same goes with AI. Currently, all AI, and generative AI in particular, yes, it's transformative, but transformative mostly for the worse. It's widening inequality through these AI systems. We are dedicating responsibility to these missions to decide, who gets job, who goes to jail, who gets education, all these in all these societal spheres. As we integrate these AI systems that haven't been properly vetted, we are further putting vulnerable, disfranchised people more at the bottom, while those, again, producing and selling these technologies are getting richer and richer. So without constant pushback, without looking at the actual empirical evidence, some of it I produced, and without challenging the current entire AI industry that we have, whether it's through public outrage or whether it's through regulation, there is no self-correction. Because maybe, say, back in the 1950s and 60s, when the entire AI was conceived, John McCarthy, people like that had the vision of AI simulating human intelligence, cognition. Over the decades, all that is gone out. Now AI and capitalism is completely aligned. So AI is powering capitalism, it's giving people and companies that already have power, more power, and governments see AI as, making systems efficient, as cost-cutting. So governments also, they pay very little attention about the downstream societal impacts. They see AI as opportunity to accelerate the economy, to gain capital. So we are really, there is a lot that is as obstacle to a society that benefits from AI equally. From every vector you look at, what we have is AI being used as a tool to further inequality and equity all across the world.
We're going to have to learn the commandments from this, I think, after the session, because we're almost out of time. But Peter, you have a closing thought.
Yeah, I was just going to say that let's talk about the upside, too. So
let's end on a slightly more utopian note, shall we?
No, exactly. We can predict 4 hours in advance, based on hospital patient data, that someone can become hemodynamically unstable 4 hours from that event happening, and then put in place actions to save their life. So there is a lot of incredible good. We can take a 69% more accurate MRI scans at 3 times the speed, leveraging smart speed AI. So there's a lot that's really positive. What's key is that we have a unified set of values. And that hasn't, I think, come fully into the dialogue yet. For example, wouldn't it be great if we are endowed as equal people, not just men, with certain unalienable rights in pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness? Like if we have a unified view of that kind of set of principles, then I think it makes it much easier for us to basically judge what's right and what we apply and what we don't. And what I'm hoping to see is that we take advantage of the lessons of the risks on the basis of a unified set of principles and some regulation and healthy skepticism that is trained to deliver a richer, less monoculture society.
Well, if there wasn't quite enough skepticism in the room before, I think a little bit more has been instilled during this session.
Yeah.
Let's continue this talk over dinner. I'm afraid we're out of time for now, but thank you both all very much.
Thank you.